That's $1.1 trillion. And the argument, that spending is stimulus. And then here, a couple of things stand out to me. One of them said that FDR's New Deal actually did work. That but what happened was Roosevelt in the 30s lost his nerve, didn't spend enough money, got worried about spending too much money, and therefore we ended up with a recession within a depression in the late 30s. But if he had just spent enough money, we would have come out of that depression before World War II, the biggest stimulus plan ever came about. That's really very representative of Obama's presentation, and a lot of it's verbatim. So I listen to that and I think, oh man, this fellow will not lose his nerve on spending. FDR lost his nerve, and he's going to publicly tell every Republican member of the House of Representatives that FDR's mistake was he didn't spend enough money. That was my first insight into what was going to happen. We didn't see this all at this point. He was asking for $750 billion, and he for stimulus, and he said, I don't want to take over all the businesses. I don't want to nationalize anything. I like free enterprise, but we need to do this, and we need to construct. He said, this is just one leg of a multi-legged stool that we have to construct. So I do a little calculation, and I come up with about $8 trillion, maybe is what he's talking about altogether. And I said so into the press, and I got criticized for inflating Obama's request. But today, you know that it was a lot bigger than the $8 trillion, even though back then we were in this $1 trillion deal. Now, so because we have, I want to just tell you what $1 trillion is. It took a little trouble to figure this out. And actually, a lot of you know Wayne Briggs in this room, and he did the first figure it out, and I did the second. But how do we equate this so we understand what $1 trillion is? And so Wayne's calculation is this. If you had 1,000 acres, crop acres, and you farmed that every year and turned it to corn every year, and if it raised 160 bushel on average every year, and you just put that corn in the bin and you started counting the kernels, 78 years from now, you will have raised on that 1,000 acres 1 trillion kernels of corn. That's $1 trillion. Or, I put it in this other measure, and that is that we'll raise about 2.25 billion bushels of corn this year. And let's just say it's worth $4, so take us to $10 billion would be the value of this year's corn crop, roughly speaking. Let's just say we raised $10 trillion, we raised, see how easy that falls off my tongue now? I couldn't say that a decade ago, now it rolls out. We raised $10 billion with the B dollars worth of corn this year, and we do the same thing next year and next year and next year. It won't just be, what it will be, $1 trillion is 100 years of all of Iowa's corn crop. All the corn we raise every year for a century in today's value, that's $1 trillion. But the budget is another thing. The deficit in this budget is actually $9.3 trillion. So if you'll just let me round that up to $10 trillion, because you really can't ever trust government to spend less than they say. So let's just go to $10 trillion deficit created by this budget. Now, it's not all the corn that Iowa raises in a century. That's $1 trillion. But it's all of the corn that Iowa raises in a millennium. If everybody that raised corn in this state committed every kernel of corn to paying off the deficit created by this budget, it is 1,000 years, 1,000 Iowa corn crops. That's how big this deficit is. When I first went to Congress, I was working to produce and offer a balanced budget. I thought we ought to have a balanced budget. And they told me in the beginning, this is under Republican control, that we can't balance the budget and we don't have a balanced budget. I said, well, I want to vote for a balanced budget and I want to produce one. Several times we made a run at trying to produce a balanced budget out of our little staff, and not out of the budget staff or out of all of the teams that are out there. And we always came up short of being able to understand it well enough to make the argument against all the people that would resist the idea. But it is a great, big, difficult task. And just generally speaking, it's so bad today. It's worse today than it was then, of course, because deficits have been going up and up and up. And this deficit It doubles this budget doubles the national debt in 5.5 years and triples it in 10 years. That's how big it is. And if you wanted to balance the budget today, just simply across the board, to give you a sense of where we are, what we're spending versus what we're projecting to bring in, you would have to include with these cuts, and believe me, I am not for this, but it tells you how it is. You'd have to include Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest, and our national defense budgets in with this to across-the-board cut and cut all of the programs out there and dial it down to 32%. Almost $1 out of $3 would have to be peeled out of the budget in order to get it to balance of this year. That's how far out of whack this is. And so we at least introduced a budget, the Republican Study Committee, of which I'm on the steering committee, and it was at my insistence that we offer a balanced budget. Well, we did introduce a budget that balances in 10 years. 10 years. I mean, that was the best we could do with the hardcore conservatives in the House. And so it's either that, or the only other way you do a balanced budget is you can raise taxes substantially, and I don't think we want to kill this economy any more than it already is, or you can print a lot of money. And then with the inflation makes it possible that you can pay it off with inflated dollars, but everything gets out of balance when that happens. And so that's where we are with this economy. And by the way, there was a $410 billion omnibus spending bill that came in. It was all these things that they didn't want to have a debate about on the floors. They packed them all together. And that was 1,222 pages. I thought that'd be, I don't know, like that. It was released at 11 o'clock at night, available on the internet. And they came up the following morning at 10 o'clock for 2 hours of debate. Now, go figure out how you read that, figure out what's in it, and then figure out what's not in it, and do that overnight. So we argued against the things we could find, and I voted against it, and a lot of us voted against that one. And every Republican voted against the stimulus package. 178 of us said, no, that's too much spending. So I guess I've depressed you enough with all that.